Back at it with spring practice number 10 at Nebraska, featuring the wide receivers. I'm going to say it. They're set to be a strength for the Huskers. We'll tell you why, or maybe we'll disagree. It's coming up.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show. Another day, another episode, and it's brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose, head to FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. And we appreciate you all making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, quite the cold open there, Mitch. You're fired up about the wide receivers, it sounds like.
I am fired up about the wide receivers. I feel like the wide receivers, Connor, have been kind of they've been kind of dragging Nebraska football down for a while. The Huskers can't retain wide receivers. The only wide receivers that Nebraska gets, and they've had some good ones come through the transfer portal. This year, they've got some more good wide receivers through the transfer portal in Jahmal Banks and Isaiah Neyor. But I also think that Nebraska has a group of wide receivers finally within the program that they're developing, and that is why Nebraska's group under Garret McGuire is set to be a strength for this team.
Well, it'll be good to get those guys. I mean, they were carrying a bit of we're talking about Malachi Coleman and Jalen Lloyd. Those guys toward the end of the year last year were carrying quite the load for them. They had to do a lot of stuff that probably wasn't quite comfortable for them yet in their freshman year. So I think by adding those guys who you're probably going to be depending on in Banks and Neyor, from what it sounds like, things are going pretty well in spring ball right now. I think it's good to get those guys back on sort of a regular developmental track where you're not necessarily leaning like Malachi Coleman doesn't have to go catch 10 touchdowns this year. It'd be nice if he did, but he doesn't have to in order for Nebraska to get production out of that spot, which is huge. And I mean, it's another we mentioned this briefly, I think before on a previous podcast, but Nebraska's had some good success in the portal with wide receivers who have come over and had experience at other places or lower levels. And when you talk about Trey Palmer and you talk about Samari Toure and, so I think, they have a pretty good ability. Although, those were under the previous coaching staff. I think Nebraska has shown the ability to kind of take those guys and with experience and plug them in and get them what they wish for, which is more production and a shot at the NFL and, have a featured role in the offense as well as the developmental piece. I think you hit it though, Mitch. Like the thing that makes me most excited about the group is the fact that you could bring some of those younger guys along just a little bit slower and at a regular pace. That feels like a pretty good track for development for them.
Therein lies the key, I think, for Nebraska and its wide receiver group is that they're not forced to bring along. And it's not just Coleman and Lloyd, but Jaden Doss is a guy that Nebraska felt strongly enough about last year that once he played in 4 games, he sat the rest of the way. He was set to be someone who could have contributed at the end of the season in November, and he wasn't out there because they wanted to preserve that redshirt season. And then Demetrius Bell wasn't available to Nebraska last year, but he was a star in practice. And very early in the offseason, I started to hear about Demetrius Bell as somebody who just ran through Nebraska's defense at times. As good as Nebraska's defense was, he was a scout team guy, and he won a lot of battles against the secondary, Evan Cooper's secondary, Tony White's defense. So they're very excited about Demetrius Bell and what he can bring. But those are not players that you just want to like plug in and say, okay, here's our 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're all second-year players in the program. Go at it. And then Bell and Coleman have missed some time this spring with nothing major, but, Coleman's coming off shoulder surgery. Demetrius Bell's had a hamstring problem. So it's just really an important factor for Nebraska with Garret McGuire's group that it's got Banks and Neyor as seniors. And the reason we're talking about all of this is because Tuesday in Lincoln, we get to watch some practice, and then we're going to hear from Matt Rule and young coach Garret McGuire.
Yeah, and well, there's also the elephant in the room, kind of when you talk about wide receiver group as well. We've talked about quarterback plenty on this podcast, but I mean, there is that.
We're going to keep talking about quarterbacks.
Yeah, like, it's funny how everything comes back to that, right? It's like, yeah, what's going to be the difference between this year and last year? Well, maybe the quarterbacks won't turn it over, 30 times or whatever it ended up being last year. Maybe they'll be able to, like that. I think it was the first week of spring ball, and it was either Rule or Satterfield. One of the offensive minds was like, yeah, we're getting stuff going in the short passing game. I'm like, man, I kind of forgot that existed. Nebraska's offense last year was pretty much reduced to, throwing up a couple deep balls and hoping they hit, and then trying to get some stuff going in the run game. There just wasn't a lot going on there. So like the more dynamic, the better, but you're starting from this baseline of basically nothing. And that's why there's this kind of wide gap in what you think might have a chance to happen. Definitely what happened last year is down further. And then, there's some potential there too. So it's really quite the range on, I think, what we could see this year when you put all those pieces together offensively.
We'll do a big chunk of a show later this week when Nebraska gets set for its second major scrimmage of the spring about the turnovers that it suffered last year and just how devastating that was. If you remember back, there was a scrimmage in the middle of the spring where Nebraska had some turnover issues and Matt Rule was upset about it on a Saturday morning. And then the spring game itself featured all kinds of miscues with balls on the ground and interceptions. And it should have been, it was a red flag, and it was a sign of things to come. And we can watch these next two Saturdays as they get to scrimmage and then scrimmage again in front of 60,000 people on April 27th, where they're at with the turnovers. And the receivers are, of course, a big part of that because these guys have to make plays on the ball. I think right now they've got Banks and Neyor slotted both as players who were in that first set of three. We'll see if both of those guys play a lot in the spring game. If they're healthy, I think they'll want to do that just so they get comfortable inside Memorial Stadium. I'd probably put Jalen Lloyd alongside those two in the starting lineup if they had to make a depth chart today. And then I think you get into the second group and you've got Malachi Coleman, who's going to get a lot of reps regardless. They'll go some 4 wide this year with the new quarterback situation. So he's going to get on the field. You've got Doss in that group. I think you've got Bell in that group. You've got Alex Bullock contending for time in that group, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. So when you start to get all those names involved, that's why I feel like this wide receiver position can go from something that really held Nebraska back in 2023 to a position that is leading the way. And really it's all relative. It's all relative to the other position groups at Nebraska. If these were the wide receivers for Ohio State, you wouldn't say that it was a strength. But you look at Nebraska's quarterbacks, it's running backs, tight ends, offensive line. I think right with the offensive line, maybe right behind the offensive line, this is a strength of the offense.
Hey, I want to ask you one thing before we take a quick break and get off the wide receivers here and get to some weird drama, I guess. We'll discuss that in a second. I think we have a pretty good understanding of what Jahmal Banks kind of brings to the table. Like, he's been productive for his last 2 years at Wake Forest. Like, coaches, he's been the one guy out of the portal additions that Nebraska's had that's been like, yeah, he's good. So I don't really have concerns about him. So what have you heard so far about Neyor? Because I wasn't really sure what to think at first, given his production level, and how he's bounced around a little bit. I've heard only good things so far out of the Nebraska side of things.
Okay, I've heard some inconsistency mixed with spectacular play. And we saw a little bit of the spectacular play in just the last snippet before today, Tuesday, with being able to view practice. And that was Neyor catching a tough fade in the corner of the end zone from Daniel Kalen. It was a highlight for both of them, but every bit as much the wide receiver as it was the freshman quarterback. So yeah, he's not as much of a known commodity as what you get with Jahmal Banks, who's done it in the ACC. Neyor, of course, had the big season at Wyoming, and then the last 2 years he's been hurt for the most part at Texas and hasn't gotten the opportunity to break out. I think he's a real talent, and he's somebody that they're expecting now after watching him in this first half, a little more than half. Today's practice number 10 of the spring. Watching him work to the point now where he's probably penciled in with the ones.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good sign to have another hit out of the portal. So I mean, if indeed it goes that direction, and it is, I'll say overall as a group, like it's still a little thin, I guess, just as far as things that you can depend on. But like I said, not as much heavy weight on some of those young guys, which is huge.
Yeah. All right. Well, please follow us on Twitter at LockedOnNEB. Email us at lockedonneb@gmail.com. We'll get to questions if you have those. Make that a segment of an upcoming show. If you've just found us, please subscribe. Follow us on all the podcast listening platforms. Watch us on YouTube. Lots of ways to get Locked On Nebraska. After the break, we're going to dive into, as Connor said, some drama that's unfolding at Memorial Stadium here this spring.
Hey, it's Mitch and Connor here for the FanDuel Sportsbook. It's time for the NBA and the NHL playoffs. Baseball, of course, is in full swing now, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets. That is guaranteed. $150, win or lose. Bet on everything. Slap shots, home runs, slam dunks. In baseball, there's these things called Nerfies. No runs in the first inning. You can do that. That might hit more often than not, especially in the early season with some cold weather. And that's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything. All in an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Head to FanDuel.com. Use the code LOCKEDON, FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON, and make your first bet an automatic win. That is with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Hey, we've all been there, Connor, as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure your team can win. That's when you dig deep, lift your ready, and say, it's time to get back in the game. Pull off some bank heists. What am I talking about here? And take as much of my friends' money as I can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone with tons of new twists, including a leaderboard to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends go bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and charge others rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends in tournaments and crack open the community chest to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or on Google Play. Okay, some sad news to pass along that we heard Monday night from Greg Sharp, the voice of Nebraska football and Nebraska baseball. He announced on social media and on Sports Nightly, the statewide radio program, that he's battling cancer. Our thoughts are with Greg. Greg and his family. We wanted to certainly be able to mention that here on the show. He's a friend of everyone, not just in the Nebraska media corps, but also in the athletic department. Been calling Nebraska football games for a couple of decades, and he's always somebody who's a great voice of reason when it comes to the drama that circulates around Memorial Stadium, and has been fantastic on Nebraska baseball too. So we're thinking about Greg, and we are definitely there to pass along our support.
Yeah, I'll echo that for sure. I mean, he's one of those guys that, you know, as a younger guy in radio, kind of trying to come up and get familiar with everybody. Super easy to talk to, bounce things off of, or even if it's just a hi, hello, how's it going? Super welcoming. So yeah, our thoughts go out to Greg, and hopefully he can get through this as quickly as he possibly can, because the voice of the fall needs to be there when Nebraska takes the field in late August.
I know he wants to be there for postseason baseball too, so I'm hoping for that. All right, a little bit of a sharp turn from that. Something that we need to address. This popped on social media on Monday. This Nebraska Spring League. Have you been following it, Connor?
Okay, so I've watched a couple of the videos. I must have missed something because the whole drama thing, and then Keisei Tominaga showing up. I don't want to bury the lead here.
You spilled the beans.
Yeah. What's going on? Why is he here?
I have not really been following it after maybe the first couple of videos that went out there. I thought it just seemed kind of silly. Like maybe this is something for the players and the staff, the recruits to have some fun with during spring, which can really be just kind of a I don't want to say a boring time for football, but it's kind of a boring time. Then I watched this video that Nebraska football posted on Monday. Several things. First, the basics with Bobby Hessling, who is the investigative reporter. He's got some Lester Holt in him, I would say, is what's going on with Bobby Hessling. And then the owners of the 3 Spring League teams made appearances in some kind of it looked like a scene from The Godfather or something like that, where all the families get together.
I feel like they were going for Succession, maybe. They were all getting out of nice cars and wearing their weirdest outfits they could possibly find. They were going for something there. It was like a combination of several different things, but I liked it.
You had Dr. Susan Elza, the chief of staff for Nebraska, with this big hat on as she got out of a vehicle, and then there was Dennis LeBlanc.
Ed Foley was using a golf club as a cane, I think, is what it seemed like.
Ed Foley has legendary status. I feel like he needs to be like the first guest that we have on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. They might be able to pull that off.
Good one.
After spring practice. But Dennis LeBlanc, the academic czar of Nebraska athletics, and who signed Fred Hoiberg and Amy Williams to contract extensions during his 48 hours as the interim AD. He was an owner of a team and was dressed like it. And he mentioned Foley, who may have, well, he wasn't. He would have been perhaps the highlight of the whole thing until you saw Vince Ginta from the recruiting office with the double bird flip during the this video clip.
Oh, I sure hope that doesn't become a meme of anything of any kind.
I don't know. It was blurred out. So, and then there was it all ended with Keisei Tominaga, who is a super fan for one of these Spring League teams.
I think
he's a Rattlesnake Boys super fan, and they trekked over and tracked him down, the hooded Keisei Tominaga at the basketball practice facility. He's back from winning the 3-point world championship at the Final Four or whatever that was, and he professed his love for the Rattlesnake Boys. So I don't know. It's excellent comedy, or at least this little thing was. I legitimately laughed at it. I don't know if I'm going to continue to follow along with the Nebraska Spring League. I may just check out again, but this content, it must be good for something. I don't know. You think this is about recruiting? What's this about in your mind?
Well, I think you said it. It's a grind, and so they've done these the bigger piece of it is they've split into teams to make it more competitive, and you get those competitive juices flowing rather than just battling against yourself with the same teams every day. And there's trades, and I'm free agent pickup. I don't know. There's a whole system that I don't understand whatsoever. It seemed, and that's why I think we got caught up in a rules discussion. It looked like it centered around Deshaun Singleton, who they had weird camera footage of him going into various facilities and walking and near a train track. So no, I think it's all in good fun, but at the heart of it's competition. So it serves that purpose at the very least. I appreciate it for the comedy aspect, like you though.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to bleed over into the spring game, but I think it has to now. I think this is what they're setting up. April 27th at Memorial Stadium, Matt Rule says it's going to be vanilla, but something about this spring league. I mean, Bobby Hessling has got to be there on. Who's Bobby Hessling? I think where'd they get this guy from? Okay, good. He's doing a great job. He's going to get a job because of this. He might take our jobs because of this. So he's got to be there.
Guest of the podcast.
We could probably do that. I don't know. Or if he's going to be on the Huskers Network podcast pretty soon. But he's going to have to make an appearance in front of the crowd at the spring game, and maybe these team owners can do something too. And then they have to bring Keisei into it, right? I mean, after the video today, I think Keisei needs to be a part of it.
Oh, you're right. I think it sets up for something weird. I mean, we talked about Ole Miss's spring game and the shenanigans that they pulled off yesterday. Matt Rule is always he's about the football, and I think they want to get some stuff done, but they're also not so rigidly like, yeah, this is one of our practices and we have to use them. They're clearly having a good time about it. I'm with you. I would be surprised if this didn't pop up in one shape or another during the spring game in some way. Like, I don't know if you're going to have 3 different jerseys for the 3 different teams that are represented in the spring league, but I love the idea of them, making some fun out of it, but also trying to keep it as competitive as they possibly can too.
Okay. Speaking of Keisei Tominaga, after this break, we are going to talk some Nebraska ball and Nebraska ball portal recruiting. First, the NFL draft is coming up, and Locked On's NFL mock draft is live on Wednesday. That's tomorrow, April 17th at 7 Eastern, 6 Central, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire channel, the app on your TV. Find the ultimate 6-episode series. Hear what the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts like us, even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL mock draft this Wednesday, April 17th, 7 Eastern, 6 Central, streaming live on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 channel on Amazon and the free Amazon Fire channels app, also on YouTube. All right, Mitch Sherman here for LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team fast and for free. LinkedIn is not just a job board. It helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job but might be open to it. In a given month, more than 70% of LinkedIn users do not visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you are looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, welcome back. Third and final segment here on a Tuesday. Let's dive into some Nebraska basketball. I haven't talked much about them yet on this podcast. Yeah, not at all, really. Following their exit in the NCAA tournament this year, as every college basketball team now has to do in the offseason, they have to figure out what they're going to do because half of their roster is gone. And that's definitely the case with Nebraska basketball. So officially, they got a portal addition on Monday with Andrew Morgan coming out of North Dakota State. He announced that, I think, later last week or over the weekend.
Right.
So he joins in 6'10", 245 pounds, North Dakota State. Not necessarily known as like a shot blocker or that much of a. I mean, he could be a physical presence down low, not terribly athletic, but he could shoot it a little bit. Got a little rink mast to him, that's for sure. And then yesterday, in addition, unofficially from Raleigh Worcester, who's a point guard from Utah, who joined with Craig Smith, former Nebraska assistant Craig Smith at Utah State for his freshman year. And then when Craig made the jump to Utah, he went with them. And so there's I don't know if that's a Nebraska connection, but there is at least a connection there. And so he looks like he's in line to take some significant minutes next year for Nebraska basketball as well. And then you still have Aaron Eulis at that point guard spot as well. But Worcester is a guy who last year at Utah went to the semifinals, by the way, in the NIT before they lost to Indiana State. but he was out about half the season.
Good knowledge. That's excellent that you knew that.
I gotcha. He was out about half the season though. He got hurt in January. Not much of a 3-point shooter, sat around 27-28% for the last 2 years, but the assist numbers are pretty good. 5.5 a game last year, 5 in his junior year at Utah. Had a couple games with 9, 10, 11. So distributor is what it looks like to me, and a pretty pure point guard. So those are the additions for Nebraska basketball so far.
Makes you wonder what they're thinking about Ulis. He's the Iowa transfer who was caught up in the gambling scheme and was out this season, but there was a thought, since Nebraska was keeping him around, that he would be eligible next year. But if you're bringing in a point guard, Mr. Worcester from Utah, there must still be some uncertainty, I would think, around Ulis.
I think just kind of from what I've heard around the program this year, he had been a pretty good practice player for them, giving him some pretty good looks. And I don't know, they just, probably was too far down the line to kind of insert him into the lineup. But I think from their perspective that it felt like that was kind of all cleared up. But I think generally with Nebraska's open scholarship situation, is they, have and had with the subtractions that they had, including, Lawrence and Wilcher and Ramel Lloyd, backcourt guys, Eli Rice, backcourt guy. You're probably in the mode of, take some good players that fit and that are experienced, and then you kind of figure out how the pieces fit together later. At this point, I think that's kind of where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, they don't quite have the same kind of freedom that Matt Rule has with his NIL possibilities. They can't necessarily just recruit as many players as they can get and say, okay, you're going to go talk to 1890, because there may be an NIL equivalency for you out there. Basketball is not quite in the same situation, my understanding is, with its resources in terms of NIL. And of course, you want to save that for a big time player. Nebraska basketball lost to Keisei Tominaga. We don't know about Rink Mast yet, if he's going to come back. The Huskers do have Juwan Gary and Bryce Williams coming back from the starting lineup this year, and those are two huge pieces, but gone to kind of reset here in the final minutes. Gone are Eli Rice, Jamarcus Lawrence, Matter Diop, CJ Wilcher, Blaze Cada, and Ramel Lloyd. That's all in one short swoop, small swoop of the offseason after an NCAA tournament run. Those were the portal entries. So Nebraska has a lot of work to do, both in if there's anything left in the late period of recruiting, more so though, the way college basketball works today, it's going to happen through the portal.
Yeah. Frankie Fiddler's still hanging out there in the portal. So we'll see what happens with that one. I think Nebraska would love to have a guy like that. You wonder I wonder what his role is at the high major level of college basketball. And I kind of wonder how Nebraska's selling it, but that would be a piece that they can use. But there's still a couple more spots that Nebraska would be interested in filling up. The Mast decision / injury thing is pretty important, because that's a big piece for what they have next year. So we'll see what ultimately he decides after he is getting some injuries cleaned up here at the beginning of the offseason. So there's some important days. Now here's the positive for Nebraska. Some teams are going to have to wait until mid-June to really know what their fate is next year because of the draft situation. Nebraska doesn't have that. It's a kind of a backhanded compliment, but like they can kind of go forth with however they're going to go forth right now, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it would be nice also to be able to have some players who were considering the NBA draft, but and maybe that'll happen for Nebraska on down the road, but not the case this year. You're right. Still a lot of work to do for Fred Hoiberg, and you're spot on about Mast. I recall talking to him late in the season, and he did say that he had to have some kind of off-season surgery. So perhaps his announcement is they're waiting, is dependent on how he comes out and how the rehab begins for him, and if he's going to have an opportunity to go overseas. I mean, he's an overseas guy. He's not an NBA player, but if he can make some money playing in the well, he doesn't want to play in the Netherlands, his home country. I think he'd rather play in a higher level European league. But if he's healthy, he may very well get that opportunity. And yeah, good point also on Frankie Fiddler, the UNO player out of
Wing,
Bellevue
probably.
West. Yeah. Who's in the portal, a slasher, I guess you could call him, big time scorer with the Mavericks the last few years. So Creighton's on him, Nebraska's on him, Wisconsin's on him. I believe Michigan State is the latest to enter the fray for Frankie Fiddler. So we'll be watching, and an announcement has been expected soon with Frankie. So lots to continue to watch with Fred Hoiberg's team, and we'll get a sense probably here over the next several weeks what the Huskers in 2024-25 are going to look like.
Yep. All right, Mitch. We will reconvene tomorrow, and we'll have takes coming out for the final open window of practice. So should be fun. Thanks for listening today. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.